so glad you're here today, and whether you're a regular around here or this is just your first time clicking on one of my videos, welcome. I'm Amy Center. I love helping women like you study the Bible with more clarity and confidence using a method I created called the Simple Method. It's an acronym that I created after years of feeling overwhelmed by Bible study tools that just didn't work with how I learned. I'd been in church my whole life, but sometimes I would open my Bible and think, where do I even start? And when I went through life's trials, everything I believed was thrown into question. How much was trust and how much was me not making smart decisions? So I needed some better guidance. I needed to understand who God was. I needed to be able to discern what the Bible was saying instead of what other people were saying about the Bible. And stop using it as a tool to serve me instead of learning ways to serve God through it. So if you are thinking, where do I even start? How do I take notes? How do I dig deeper? I'm reading, I'm not connecting, any of those things. This method is created for you as well. So each week we go step by step through a passage or a theme, and I walk you through how to use this simple method to break it down, reflect on it, and apply it to your real life. So I recommend a journaling Bible, but if you don't have that, you can grab a piece of paper, write some notes, post-it notes that you could put in your Bible work well too. Grab a highlighter or two, and let's get studying this week's chapter. What I'm going to do is have us start in Psalm chapter 40. So flip on over there, and while you are getting ready, I will outline the acronym for the simple method as we walk through it together. So today we're studying Psalm chapter 40, and we are going to outline all the steps of the simple method. So the very first step is study, and that's where we're going to read this more like a textbook when we're studying it, because I want us to actually dig into it and not just look for feelings and motivate ourselves through if we're feeling good about what we're reading or we're bored and want to skip over it. I want us to take it as if it's a book of information and we're trying to make sense of the information. So I understand the Bible is not a textbook, but if we don't study it, then we are making it about ourselves. We're looking for answers for how does this solve my problem right now? What is God telling me right now? And that's an easy way to take things out of context or feel disassociated from what's being written to the people it was written to. It's so much more rich when you can combine the historical aspect with the chronological order and the application and the person that actually wrote it and lived it and were affected by it. All those things is what I want us to dive into without having to spend hours in the text every day. This is a simple, that's why it's called simple, method of digging deep very quickly. So here's what we're going to do is we're going to study this passage. That means we're going to read it out loud, and I'm going to highlight things that I notice. So some things that I can highlight are things that provide some context clues. For example, if you see names or places or setting or dates, patterns or repetitions, usually that means it's really important. God wants us to pay attention if he keeps saying it over and over and over. Or if you see an unknown word, don't just skip over it. Spend some time in it. Look it up. I'll give you some resources to help you with that. And then the other thing, if you can't really find any of those things, most of the time I look for action phrases. So things that that are being taught in here. So things to do. So for example, in the first sentence, it says, I waited patiently for the Lord. So I'm going to highlight waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. So he heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit. He lifted me Out of the mud and mire, he set my feet on a rock, set my feet on a rock. So I'm just kind of looking for these action phrases, what happened, so that I can follow the storyline. Now this is more written like poetry because it's a psalm, but this will help me stay focused to not space out or forget what I was just reading. When I'm done reading it, I can go back and look at these highlighted phrases and it kind of refreshes my memory. So I'm going to go ahead and read through and start highlighting some action phrases. I might even find some adverbs or adjectives. Those English teacher concepts are helpful to help you stay focused, to look for repetitions and patterns, action things to do from it. So let's keep reading, or I'll start over on verse 1. I'm in the NIV, so if yours is a little different, that's why. I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear the Lord and put their trust in him. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, who does not look to the proud, to those who turn aside to false gods. Many, Lord my God, are wonders you have done, the things you planned for us. None can compare with you. Were I to speak and tell of your deeds, they would be too many to declare. Sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but my ears you have opened. Burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not require. Then I said, here I am, I have come. It is written about me in the scroll. I desire to do your will, O my God. Your law is written in within. Your law is within my heart. Verse 9. I proclaim your saving acts in the great assembly. I do not seal my lips, Lord, as you know. I do not hide your righteousness in my heart. I speak of your faithfulness and your saving help. I do not conceal your love and your faithfulness from the great assembly. Do not withhold your mercy from me, Lord. May your love and faithfulness always protect me. For troubles without number surround me. My sins have overtaken me. I cannot see. There are more than the hairs of my head, and my heart fails within me. Be pleased to save me, Lord. Come quickly, Lord, to help me. May all who want to take my life be put to shame and confusion. May all who desire my ruin be turned back in disgrace. May those who say to me, aha, aha, be appalled at their own shame. But may all who seek you rejoice and be glad in you. May those who long for your saving help always say, the Lord is great. As for me, I am poor and needy. May the Lord think of me. You are my helper and my deliverer. You are my God. Do not delay. So I just kind of picked what stood out to me as action things. I might have missed some. Some might not be technically action, but it's those key words that stick out to me that I want to notice when I'm starting to take notes. So I've got rejoice and be glad, my help, my deliverer, my God. So these are kind of repetitions down here. We've got waiting patiently for the Lord. He set my feet on a rock, gave me a firm place to stand. So a lot of these things give me a visual, or to come back and look at this color-coded section so that I can, or this highlighted section, so that I can kind of piece together what I'm noticing to start on my next step, which is illustrate. And that's where I either draw a scene of what's happening, or I just kind of make some symbols to show some keywords that I want to pull out. And so for this one, I noticed kind of a prayer template sort of throughout this. So it's David's talking about, here's some things he's done. He's waited patiently for the Lord. He's trusting in the Lord. He is, let's see. He says, I desire to do your will. Your law is within my heart. And then there's other sections where David's just simply telling good things God has done. He's heard my cry. He's lifted me out. He set my feet on a rock. And those are woven throughout as well. And then there's another thing where he kind of shifts gear and starts talking about his enemies. And that to me is where David's talking about more about this is what he's doing. This is God's goodness of what he's already done. And then when he starts talking about his enemies, he's giving a request of, this is what I would like you to do. So what I'm going to do is kind of pull out those sections and draw a little illustration next to those to kind of keep track of how David said this prayer. Did he just, every line is just all over the place, or he has some kind of method to his madness? So I'm going to do that real quick with some different colored pens. So it doesn't matter what color, but just get 3 different colors. I'm going to use some primary-ish colors. And what I'll do is just kind of color code them. So let's see. Let's do, I'm gonna move this guy to the side. Waiting patiently for the Lord is what David did. I'm gonna zoom in so you can see that. So I'm just doing like a little bracket of that section. So he waited for the Lord. This was David's faithfulness. So I'm going to do a little heart right there to show that David waited. That was something he did. That was his response to God. And then here's what God did. He lifted me out of the slimy pit. New song. Many will see. I think right here is kind of where God's goodness is shown. So verse 1, I would label with a heart, and here's what I'll do right here. David's faithfulness. So these are things David has done. This is his response. He's waiting patiently for the Lord. Then he moves on to say what God has done. This is why he's being faithful, because of God's goodness. And then when we get to the part about the enemies, where David's kind of going over what trials he's going through and he's giving those prayer requests, let's do this little speech bubble and we'll write David's requests. Okay, so we've just created a little key right here. I didn't have to write this stuff, but it helps, rather than just assuming you know what this symbol means, to put a little key on the side. So I'm just going to label section or chapter 40 with these 3 symbols. It's either talking about David's faithfulness, what he's currently doing to stay faithful, or reflecting on God's goodness, or a request that he's saying, please do this for me, like a prayer request. Okay, so what's the next part? Many will see and fear the Lord. That is back to David's faithfulness, and it goes all the way to turning aside from false gods. So verse 1 is David's faithfulness. Verse 2 and half of 3 is God's goodness. The second half of 3 all the way through 4 is David's faithfulness again. And then verse 5 all the way through 6 is where we talk about God's goodness again. Many are the wonders you've done. You don't require burnt offerings and sin offerings. You've opened my ears. And then I said, here I am, I have come, it is written about me in the scroll, I desire to do your will. So this is back to David's faithfulness again. And this is kind of a long section that goes all the way to verse 11. So there's David's faithfulness again, verses 7 through 11. And verse 12 all the way through 15, which is on my next page, is where it kind of shifts gear and starts talking about David's trials, his requests, what he would like done with his enemies. So verse 12 through 15, I'm going to zoom this out a little bit. Just do that little speech bubble again over here, since that verse is still over there. And then verse 16 through the first half of 17 is when David shows his faithfulness again. Rejoice and be glad you, say the Lord is great. I am poor and needy, so he's showing this humility right here instead of anger towards God. And then the very last section is you are my help, my deliverer, you're my God, don't delay. So this is telling about God's goodness again, your help, your deliverer, you're my God, don't delay. So this actually, what I've done right here is I've done a little bit of labeling alongside the illustrating to organize all this information so that when we get to this step, which is partly what we did right here, was mapping it out, kind of organizing that information. But I'm going to show you what we do with this information now that we've got it. So what we really just did was illustrate along with mapping. And mapping is just my way of saying make it some kind of organized visual, a graphic organizer where you're combining diagrams and labeling. Sometimes I'll do like a bubble map or a Venn diagram or a flow chart or a tree map, but this one I liked to break into categories like that. So for this step on map, we kind of combined illustrate and map, which I do sometimes. And so this step is actually done. So now we're going to personalize it. And this is where we kind of say, so what does this mean for me? Not to make it about you, but how can I be transformed by this? How can this impact me so that what I'm reading is actually transforming me? So what we're going to do for Personalize is I always first look for some kind of memory verse. This verse is the very first verse in this because we're talking about patience. So it says, I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. So this is a memory verse that I might pull out from this. There's lots of good verses in this. The first and the last verse are really good. But yeah, take a memory verse, something that you can relate to, something you can look at and put on your mirror throughout the week, or something that you can actually memorize, have your kids quiz you, so that you can, because we all have had to wait patiently for the Lord. So this is a great verse for everybody. So the next thing you could do for Personalize is turn this into some sort of prayer. And what I thought would be perfect is taking the section on God's goodness, this blue section right here, and just making a prayer that's praising God for his goodness. So thank you, Lord, for hearing my cry, for lifting me out of a slimy pit. Thank you for giving me a rock to put my feet on, a firm place to stand. Thank you that you've put a new song in my mouth when I've been through trials. You've brought me out on the other side. Lord, you've done so many wonders. You have so many great things planned for us. Lord, I want to tell of your deeds, but there's so many, I can't even declare them all. So I'm just going through this blue section of God's goodness and turning it into a prayer. The other thing you can do for the Personalized step is to come up with some sort of journal prompt, or you can pray it or write out your prayers, which is what I like to do. And this one made me think of how to use this as a prayer template. So for this, I'm thinking David wrote, here's how I've been faithful. This is why I've been faithful. Here's how I'm going to continue to be faithful. This is why I'm going to continue to be faithful. Here's how I'm going to be faithful again. So he tells God 3 times why he's faithful to him. And he praises God 2 times in between those. And then he asks for his prayer requests. So the first thing he doesn't say is, for troubles without number surround me. My sins have overtaken me. I cannot see. My heart fails me. Save me, Lord. Come quickly to help me. He waits till he's praised God and told him, I've been faithful. And then he asks, please, because I know you can do these things, and because I'm being faithful, this is what I ask that you do. And then he ends his prayer not with, amen, do what I said, please. But then he goes back to, I am just going to seek you and rejoice and be glad in you. This is what I'm going to do. Because why? He goes back to God's goodness. You're my helper. You're my deliverer. You're my God. Don't delay. So he's reminding himself as well of God's faithfulness, which is how he can continue to be faithful to God. So this is a great prayer template for us to reflect on these things. So you might say, I love you, Lord. I'm going to wait patiently for you because in the past, this is what you've done. I'm going to trust in you. I'm not going to turn aside to trust in other things because of all these things that you're doing in your greatness, and you've created me and all these other blessings. And then you're going to say, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. I desire to do this. Use these as templates. And then you get right here and you say, this is what's going on, and I'm calling out to you for help. So you're using this as a template as you're praying your own prayer. And then make sure you don't end there. It's like a sandwich of you saying, like, when you've got to talk to somebody about something hard, you give them a compliment, then you do the critique, and then you end with a compliment. It's like a compliment sandwich. This made me think of, this whole thing starts with patience. So in my mind, it's like a formula for a patience sandwich. So I'm going to do all these things because I'm going to deal with these trials in I'm going to wrap my trials in patience. And how do I get that patience? I rely on your goodness to give me faithfulness. So that's something else you could kind of draw, is patience in trials. I'm going to draw this little cheeseburger guy. And that's what I'm going to label. I probably should have drawn that in a different color, but I'm going to use these. Okay, so my requests are my trials. God's goodness. And my faithfulness. So my thoughts are all over, but I hope that was like a cohesive thought, that it makes sense in my mind, but I know that I can go a roundabout way of saying it. So I just wanted to make sure that this made sense to you, that I was saying this is how this whole concept is about patience in what? In trials, because his focus really is on this. Or his problem really is here, but his focus is on God's goodness and his faithfulness so that he can get through these trials. So this is how I want you to apply it to your life, is how can I use this as a prayer prompt to get through my trials? How can I have patience? I'm going to rely on God's goodness, and I'm going to rely on my faithfulness as a response to his goodness, and just circle around your trials. Just keep going back and forth. God's goodness, my faithfulness, God's goodness, my faithfulness. And that will get you through your trials with a better mindset than just trying to get in survival mode like most of us default to. So the next step is link, and I'll zoom this out. And this is where we double check we're not taking anything out of context, or we're looking for more insight into this passage. So instead of just reading it and moving on, we want to see, okay, well, let's talk about who's writing this. When were they writing it? Why were they writing it? Who were they writing to? And all those things. So sometimes we can get that information from the footnotes down here. So for example, this one might give you a little bit more information, like, let's see, this little tiny D on verse 6. Sacrifice and offerings you did not desire, but my ears you have opened, and burnt offerings and sin offerings you did not require. So it says, ears you had opened. It's got a little C for this footnote that says, some manuscripts say, but a body you have prepared for me. And then for this sin offering, it says D, or purification offerings. And if you're going, okay, what's the difference? If you look up sin offerings and purification offerings, you can find lots of information about those in the book of Leviticus. So he's talking about these priestly rituals that they do that were given to them back in the laws of Leviticus. And so he's saying, these are your rules that you've given us, but you didn't even require me to do that. You didn't even desire sacrifice and offering. You just desired my will. You desired my heart. And so that's a huge thing that's going to be foreshadowed when Jesus comes. And the Pharisees are very much about the rules. And Jesus says, but you're missing the point. David hints this right here, that what's more important than those sacrifices are our desires to do his will and how our heart is positioned in relation to God. So the different footnotes at the bottom can give you some extra verses to look up. It can give you some extra insight, historical words you might not know. You can start looking up. There are words in here that you don't know. You can look them up in a Bible dictionary, which you can also Google what the word is, but I would add the word, what's the biblical definition of a certain word? Because you might find the word grace and mercy in a Bible that is related to worldly grace and mercy, and sometimes it's a different description because it will relate it to what that means specifically for Christ's relationship with us and stuff. So just by putting a word into Google and saying what's the biblical definition of this word instead of what's the definition of this word. And sometimes I like to do both and then compare them. And sometimes they're the same, and sometimes it's very obvious that one's a Christian definition, one's a worldly definition. So that's interesting to do too. So the other thing you can do if you want some context, for example, I know this is from David. It's a psalm, which is a hymn. It's a song that he wrote. He's a director of music. So I'm learning that this is the person, this is why it was written. And then I also want to know, well, what's the context? What trial is he going through? Because before, when you look at the context before, which is another great way to find clues, he's going through a trial. And then the one after this, he's going through a trial. So he's going through trials, and one looks like it might be enemies. One looks like it might be self-inflicted. One looks like it might be something that God allowed in his life. So it's confusing as to if he's talking about 3 different trials or it's all the same. And so a great way to figure that out is a commentary, which is basically notes on every verse of the Bible for the most part. So you look at a commentary, and you can buy these at bookstores, you can go online. But you look at a commentary, and I suggest you compare a couple, because if they're vastly different, that means there might be some misinterpretation in there. But if they're basically on the same line, then it's probably an accurate translation or commentary. But I've got lots of resources I can recommend as well. But yeah, looking at those commentaries can give you an example of this was written this time, probably addressing this specific trial. And so I have these Bible study cheat sheets, but I don't go into very great detail about those things. For example, I've got this one on Psalm, but it's more about talking about the styles of the poetry that's written in here, and the types of wisdom that is found in them. And then when you go over to Samuel, it talks a little bit about the historical aspect, David's life, and it doesn't go into great detail. But what I will tell you is I just released a book called Women of the Old Testament, and a ton of that book is about women in David's life. And what I wanted to show you was when you go over here to the table of contents, it says the kingdom, and it's got David's family. And we have Michal, which is a wife, Abigail, another wife, Bathsheba, another wife, and Tamar, which is actually his daughter. And this one has page numbers you can flip over to. And right here, you can see every woman in David's family. You can't see that very good, can you? You can see every woman in David's family. So you're going to get a lot of context and a lot of just seeing the dynamic of this family and how all these people are related, and then going into detail on some of these women that have multiple chapters written about them. You're going to start to understand real quickly some of the trials David was going through just by looking at the role he played as a father and a husband and a sometimes an uncle, all kinds of different relationships that caused a lot of issues in David's life. So this is another great resource for you to get some really good details, especially from the viewpoint of the women in David's life. So the last step we have in the simple method is expand. And what I mean by that is just keep going. So make that plan to keep going, whether it is going deeper in one of these steps, like, oh, I'm going to go buy a Bible commentary, or I'm going to look up some words on Google, or I am going to write that journal prompt you talked about. If you're going to go deeper in one of these steps, you're going to look at footnotes, whatever it is, or just read the next chapter and do the simple method over here on Psalm 41. You just go through the steps again. Thank you so much for joining me today, and my hope is that each of these videos I create give you a practical way to stay consistent in the Word and really connect with what you're reading. If you want to try the simple method in your own quiet time, I've got free tools, journaling pages, lots of Bible study resources over at amycenter.com. And I just finished a full guide to walk you through each step in more detail. So look at the show notes below and you can get that link as well with a freebie in there I might mention. And I'd love to hear what you got out of today's study. So leave a comment below if something stood out to you. And don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to keep walking through the Bible with me each week. Keep showing up even on those messy days.